All right, guys, we're going to continue along here. We're going to be in Matthew 16 and Mark 8. If you were to jump back to Matthew 15:39, we just read it. And then in Mark 7, the very end of Mark 7 there, we also just read the same thing. So this is the territory that we're in. It was Dalmanutha or Magdala. And so Magdala is actually not even used anymore. I think it's called Magadan, something like that. Anyway, it's just the name of the territory that they're in. And so Dalmanutha is the harbor of Magdala. They're the same area. They're not referring to two different places here. So we're going to pick up in Mark 8 first, and we're going to read two sections. Actually, I'm going to break them down by my notes, but we're going to read Mark 8, 10, and 12, and then we're going to read Matthew 16, 1 through 4, and then we're going to continue along, and I'll give you those verses here shortly. So let's the ending is actually, the reason it's 10 through 12 is because that gives you his location there. Immediately got into the boat with his disciples, came to the region of Dalmanutha. Now remember, we spoke of before, if you're following along and maybe writing it in your notes, whether we're speaking to Jews or we're speaking to Gentiles. Remember, the rules were a little bit different amongst the crowd he was speaking to. And so let's read here. Then the Pharisees came out and began to dispute with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven, testing him. But he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, "Why does this generation seek a sign? Assuredly I say to you, no sign shall be given to this generation." Now let's jump over to Matthew 16 and read 1 through 4 here. And so then the Pharisees and the Sadducees came, testing him, and asked him that he would show them a sign from heaven. He answered and said to them, "When it is evening, you say it'll be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and threatening. You hypocrites, you know how to discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to you except the sign of the prophet Jonah." And he left them and departed. So that was a quick trip. And so, because we're going to talk about, he literally went from one side of the Sea of Galilee to the other, and then immediately goes back. So this was quick. They continue to reject him here. But in the Old Testament, we hear the name of the Dalmanutha and Magdala as Migdal. Okay, and this is where Mary Magdalene is from. Just so we know, that's a name that most of us know of here, right? And so he's clearly scolding them, and he has told them this before. And again, I've touched on this. When something is repetitive, let it stand out, right? Number one, he's again calling them hypocrites. And two, and mainly here, it says a wicked and adulterous generation. And over in Mark, he specified this generation here, right? This generation. And so remember, this is who he's speaking to, this particular group of people, right? And what's going to happen to them because of their denial of Jesus, their Messiah. And so that is specifically who he's talking to. So now we're going to continue along in Matthew 16. We're going to be reading 5 through 12, and then we'll be in Mark 8. And we're going to pick up where we left off here, and in Mark 13 through 21. So we'll go ahead and begin in Mark here, 8:13. And he left them, and getting into the boat again, and departed to the other side. See, he went from one side to the other, and so that's a lot of rowing. And so anyway, now the disciples had forgotten to take bread, and they did not have more than one loaf with them in the boat. These guys crack me up with their bread. And then he charged them, saying, "Take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, and the leaven of Herod." And they reasoned among themselves, saying, "Is it because we have no bread?" You could just imagine, like, Jesus is just like, palm face, like, for the love of Pete, guys. But Jesus, being aware of it, said to them, "Why do you reason because you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive nor understand? Is your heart still hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? And how many baskets full of fragments did you take up?" And they said to him, 12. And also when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large baskets full of fragments did you take up? And they said, 7. So he said to them, how is it that you do not understand? I just think it's funny that he continues to have to grind on this point. I think it's funny because we're looking through, 2020 goggles and hindsight, but, I can only imagine he's still doing the same thing today, with us living, probably same thing, palm in the face, like, come on, like, why are you guys still doing this? Because we have these scriptures to look back on, right? And we still make ridiculous mistakes and we still question. And so, anyway, let's continue along here. I jumped over to Matthew 16, and we're going to read starting in verse 5 here. So, now when his disciples had come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. And then Jesus said to them, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, is it because we've taken no bread? Still makes me laugh. But Jesus, being aware of it, said to them, oh, you of little faith, why do you reason among yourselves because you brought no bread? Do you not understand or remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000, and how many baskets you took up? Nor the 7 loaves of the 4,000, and how many large baskets you took up? How is it you do not understand that I did not speak to you concerning the bread, but beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees? And they came and understood that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven of the bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So, just a few notes here for you that they're in Gentile territory again, right? That's what he's come back to. And in Scripture, leaven is symbolic for sin, okay? Leaven is symbolic for sin. And specifically, in this particular Scripture, it is doctrine, okay? And it's going to be false doctrine, so the sin of false doctrine, okay? And so we have 3 types and 3 groups of people here that he has mentioned thus far. We have the Pharisees and Sadducees that we just spoke of, and then we had over in Mark 8, he spoke of the Herodians, right? And so, so take heed, beware of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. The Herodians were Jews that denied Jesus because he challenged their beliefs. They followed King Herod of Rome. And so, and we've spoken a little bit, some pieces about these groups of people. And so anyway, we have these 3 different false teachings and doctrines here of the people that he is warning them against, right? Remember that the Pharisees demonized Jesus. That was the unpardonable sin, right? Allocating his messianic miracle to the power of the devil. The Herodians sympathize and believe in the same things that the Pharisees believe in. And then remember that the Sadducees, who are typically priests, do not get along with the Pharisees, right? But at this point, Jesus is the enemy. So they're all against Jesus. And so Jesus is speaking to his disciples, right? Telling them to beware of the leaven, right? That they put out, the false doctrine, the false teachings that they are spreading, right? This is who would teach. And so, let's see. Oh, I just had some few notes in here that the Sadducees, they don't believe in the supernatural, right? So they don't believe that Jesus would have died and rose again. And so they believe that Jesus is against the temple ministries. Remember, he went out there and he cleared the temple twice, right? Of them because of their, really because of their lying, cheating, and stealing ways, right? When they're taking up the taxes and temple taxes and such, the sacrifices, they're selling, better sacrifices to those who they said wasn't good enough. And then the Herodians taught that he was against Roman rule, which we just spoke of here, which of course is a lie. Remember when he spoke to the man in the sand, he said to give to God what's God's and give to Caesar what's Caesar's, right? He's not against Caesar, but he's for God. And so, anyway, we'll wrap that one up here, and I'll see you again in just a little bit.